I know I've been quiet for a couple of weeks, and I owe you all an apology for the sudden radio silence. The truth is, I just haven't been able to sit in front of a microphone until today. I needed time to process something that happened to me. Most people don't understand megalophobia. When I tell them I have a phobia of large objects, they usually laugh. They think it means I get a little dizzy looking up at the Empire State Building, or that I don't like sitting in the front row at the IMAX. They don't understand the physical violence of it. They don't know about the sudden crushing weight on your chest, like the atmosphere is turned to lead. They don't know the vertigo that hits you, not from looking down, but from looking up at something so impossibly massive that your brain simply refuses to process the geometry. It's a primal, screaming instinct that says, this should not exist. You are nothing. It is going to fall, and you will be erased. I thought I had it under control until a couple weeks ago. I was taking a solitary road trip up the Pacific Northwest coast. It was late afternoon, but the daylight was already dying, suffocated by a fog so thick and heavy it felt like driving through wet cement. The ocean was completely hidden, though I could hear it, a deep, rhythmic booming against the cliffs somewhere far below my tires. I needed to stretch my legs, so I pulled into an unmarked gravel turnout. The silence aside from the distant crashing waves was absolute. Then, the fog began to thin, just a fraction, just enough for a silhouette to bleed through the gray. At first, my brain tried to rationalize it as a mountain, a small island off the coast, but the lines were too straight. The geometry was too perfect, and the color was wrong. A dead, bruised iron gray. As the wind tore a jagged hole in the mist, the true scale of the thing began to reveal itself, and my knees actually buckled. I had to grab the freezing metal of my car door just to stay upright. It was a pillar or a leg. It rose straight up out of the boiling ocean, perhaps a mile offshore. I need you to understand the size of this thing, the base of it, where the blackened, barnacle-encrusted metal met the violent white water, was so wide that it didn't look like a column. It looked like a wall. It was a solid mass of iron, easily 4 or 5 miles in circumference. If you were to take the Great Pyramid of Giza and flatten it, it wouldn't even cover a fraction of this thing's footprint. The waves smashing against it were 50-foot coastal breakers. But against this structure, they looked like ripples lapping at the edge of a teacup. I couldn't breathe. My lungs seized. Every alarm bell in my nervous system was shrieking, but my eyes were locked. I traced the structure upward and upward and upward. It defied atmospheric perspective. The metal was scored with rivets, single, rusted rivets that I realized, with a sickening jolt of perspective, had to be the size of commercial passenger jets. Great weeping streaks of rust cascaded down the sides, canyons of oxidation so deep and vast you could have flown a helicopter into them and lost it in the shadows. It went up so high that it vanished back into the cloud layer. But the clouds weren't hiding the top of it. It was generating the clouds. The sheer mass of the object was altering the microclimate, dragging the fog around its waist like a belt. And then the clouds parted higher up. My neck arched back. The vertigo hit me so hard my vision swam. Above the cloud line, maybe 30,000 feet in the air, the pillar connected to an underbelly, a flat, sprawling ceiling of rusted steel that stretched across the entire sky. It blotted out the remaining light. It was an expanse of metal the size of a continent, hovering miles above the earth, suspended by these unfathomable pillars. Hanging from this canopy were chains. The links clinked against each other in the high altitude winds, a sound that took minutes to travel down to my ears. A low, metallic groan that vibrated in my teeth. A single one of those chain links could have comfortably housed an entire cathedral. The sheer wrongness of its volume pushed my mind to the breaking point. It was so big that if it were to fall, I wouldn't be crushed. I would be vaporized by the displaced air before the metal ever even touched me. It made the earth feel like a fragile, hollow eggshell that was cracking under its weight. And then, the worst thing of all happened. It moved. A slow tectonic shift. The entire continent of steel above me groaned. A sound so deep it didn't enter my ears. It entered my bones. The pillar, the miles-wide leg, lifted. Millions of tons of ocean water poured off its base like terrifying slow-motion waterfall roaring down into the abyss. It was taking a step. I threw myself into the car. I didn't look back. I drove blind into the fog, sobbing. The steering wheel slick with the sweat from my palms. They say I just had a panic attack. They say it was an optical illusion caused by the fog in the ocean. But I know what I saw. I know the crushing, suffocating horror of absolute insignificance. And I know that somewhere out there in the deep water, something the size of a country is walking.